Okay, we are in the New World in Bana. We are still in volume number 22, still in Hilchos Shabbos, but we are starting Malacha number 39, the Malacha of Hotza'ah. This is the sixth shiur, shiur number 6 in the volume. We will start on page 281. Again, the Tzurba volumes are sponsored by the Lax family, and this one is Dr. Harold and Magda Katz volume. And now we are up to the last two shiurim in the volume, and the first one is about Erev, what we call Erev and the Daled Rishuyos, and carrying with an Erev, without an Erev. That'll be the first area of Halacha, and then we'll have to talk about Erev Chatzeros and Erev Tchumen, which will come up. But first we get the basics, the ABCs of Erevin and Hilchos Shabbos and the Rishuyos. So we start on page 281, where the pasuk tells us that we know, even though most malachos are not mentioned explicitly in the Torah, it just says Lo Sasa Kol Malacha, but few of them, here's Hotza'ah, it's one of them, is mentioned. Tosfos points out, both on Daf Tzadi Vav in Shabbos and the first Daf in Shabbos, that Hotza'ah is what we call a malacha gerua, an inferior type of malacha. It doesn't accomplish anything. You just moved from A to B, right? We discussed this, if you remember, in the Ma'aseh Shabbos discussions. The Chai Adam said that there's no Ma'aseh Shabbos, the Isra of benefiting from a malacha on Shabbos, nothing was accomplished, like the malacha of Hotza'ah. And we spoke about what about Borer, and we said Borer does accomplish something, but the pasuk says, Vayitzav Moshe v'yaviru kol b'machana lemor. Moshe sent out a command. Ish v'ishal yasu od malacha, l'shumas hakodesh. Don't do any more malacha. Chazal say, what does it mean? Don't do any more malacha. Don't do any more hotza'ah. Don't take from your tent, which is Rishus HaYachid, to me. I'm sitting in there machana levia, which is Rishus HaRabim, and that is the makar for the malacha of Hotza'ah. The Gemara in Shabbos Sadivav, source number 2. Hotza'ah gufa hechad siva. Where is Hotza'ah written? And you need a source. Amar Rabbi Yochanan to Amar Krava Yitzav Moshe ve'avir kol b'machane Moshe Yechana ve'Yosef. Where was Moshe sitting? B'machane Levia. Moshe was sitting in Machane Levia. Well, Machane Levia Rishus HaRabim Avi. Machane Levia was Rishus HaRabim. V'kamar Luhli Yisrael Lo tafiku v'teisu Rishus Yachid d'chul Rishus HaRabim. And what Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them was, don't take from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. That's the malacha of Hotza'ah. The malacha of Hotza'ah. And the Gemara says, okay, that's in one direction. Hotza'ah. What about Hachnasa? What about the other way, bringing in? That also, says the Gemara in the continuation, source number 3, Ashken Chon Hotza'ah, Hachnasa Minalan. What's the difference? Svarus, as the Gemara says, it's a Svara. After all, the malacha of Hotza'ah is just moving. So it doesn't matter what direction you move in. Michdi, Rishus L'Rishushu, Mali Afuke, Mali Iyule. Or Hachnasa. Going out, Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim, or going in, Rishus HaRabim, Rishus HaYachid, that is an Isser D'Oraisa on Shabbos of Hotza'ah, carrying something, transferring from one Rishus to the other. The Gemara also mentions and continues that there's another aspect of this malacha, and that's Ma'avir. Ma'avir Daled Amos in Rishus HaRabim. That's source number 3. Ma'avir Daled Amos Rishus HaRabim Nolan, the Mechayev. Kol Arba Amos Rishus HaRabim, Gemara Gemirla. That's Gemara Gemirla. We know that from Misora. Some say in Lumdis there's a Balamor, and the Ran at the end, I think, quotes it in Masechah Shabbos, that maybe Ma'avir is a form of Hotza'ah. That if I go out of my 4 amos, everybody is within their 4 amos existence. If I go out of the 4 amos, I am being motzi me Rishus L'Rishus. So that's a suggestion that some Rishonim have. But either way, that's the malacha of Hotza'ah. Hotza'ah, Hachnasa, Ma'avir is all the Oraisa. The Rambam also quotes this pasuk as the source. The Rambam in Hilchos Shabbos Perek Yud Beis, source number 4. Hotza'ah Rishus L'Rishus, Malacha me'avos malachosi is one of the avos malachos, the last one on the list. V'yafal pi shedavar zet im kol gufei Torah mipi Moshe misinai nemru. Even though it was all given from Moshe Rabbeinu, harehu omer b'Torah ish v'ishal yasu od malacha l'tzumas hakodesh v'yikol eim avi. He quotes that pasuk. Halamata shahava malacha koreosa v'chein lamdu mipi hashmua. Right, the Rambam might not say Gemara Gemira lamis halacha Moshe misinai. Rashi and Tosfos say that in a few places in Shas, but the Rambam might just say it means Misora. V'chein lamdu mipi hashmua sha'amaver b'Rishus HaRabim. Mitchilas arba l'sof arba, 4 amos. How are you kit motzi Rishus L'Rishus? Even the Rambam forgot about that. The Rambam himself has the kit. It's like motzi. So that just means you're chayiv in both, or he's saying something substantive about the nature of Hotza'ah. If you're mavir, it's like motzi me Rishus L'Rishus. Good. Regarding Hotza'ah, we know there are 4 categories of rishuyos. 4 categories of domains on Shabbos. And the Gemara lists them. Shabbos Daf Vav, you have it there in source number 5. Torah Rabbanan, Arba Rishiyos LaShabbos. There are 4 Rishiyos that we have to know that have different halachas for Shabbos. Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim, Karmelis, Umakom P'tur. Private, public, Karmelis, which, as we'll see, is a Rishus HaRabim D'Rabbanan. On a Torah level, Karmelis is a Rishus HaYachid. And a Makom P'tur, which is a exempt Rishus. And what are the halachas? What are these? And what are the halachas? So Makom P'tur, as we'll see, it's mutter to do anything in a Makom P'tur. It's an exempt place. Taking something from a Makom P'tur, putting something in a Makom P'tur, that's mutter. Rishus HaRabim, Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim, that's what we said is Daraisa. Karmeles, as we'll see on a Torah level, is a Rishus HaYachid. But Midrabanan, we consider it a Rishus HaRabim. So the Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, Arba Rishiyos L'Shabbos. There are 4 Rishiyos. Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim, Karmelis, Umakom P'tur. So what are the 4? So the Gemara lists off a little bit of the definitions, but the Rishonim add in more. Ezi Rishus HaYachid. What's a Rishus HaYachid? A private domain. Charetz Shehu Amok Asar Baracha Rabbah. It has to be 4 tfachim deep. You have a ditch. 4 tfachim deep. 10 tfachim deep and 4 tfachim wide. It has to have that minimum area. 10 deep and 4 wide, or 10 up. V'chein geder, if you have a mound or a fence or some type of elevation, that also, it's 10 high and 4 across. That's Rishus HaYachid. What's Rishus HaRabim? Any public area. Sratia, a big street. Platia, a big square. Agdola. Streets that go through, that are open on both sides. Zui Rishus HaRabim Gemura. A Motziin Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim Zu. You can't go from one to the other. Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. Vein Machnisin Rishus HaRabim Zu Rishus HaYachid Zu. Vim Hotzi V'Hichnes, and if you did it, that's an Issa Daraisa. And therefore, B'Shogi Chayav Chatos, B'Mezid, Anish Kares, V'Nizkal. Those are the 2 major Daraisa Rishuyos. Aval, says the Gemara, Yam, the sea, Ubika, a valley area, V'Istavan, Isva, Karmelis, Eino Lo Rishus HaRabim, V'Lo Rishus HaYachid. It's a rabbinic area. V'Nosim Nosim B'Tocha, V'Nochas B'Tocha, but if you move things in it, Issa D'Rabbanan. Issa D'Rabbanan. You can't transfer from a Karmelist anywhere to Rishus HaRabim or to Rishus HaYachid, because it's Rishus HaYachid midaraisa, but it's Rishus HaRabim midrabanan. So you can't go from it to Rishus HaRabim. V'lo Rishus HaRabim lutocha, says the Gemara. Ve'in machlisin Rishus HaYachid lutocha, v'lo mitocha Rishus HaYachid. It has a middle sheet, a status. Adam, but then the last one is Adam Omed Al Hiskopa, Notam Balabais, Venosin Lo. Notam Ani Venosin Lo, Bavash Litum Alabais, Venosin Lo Ani, Miani Venosin Alabais. As we'll see, this Gemara, it is alluding to the idea that to do a Malacha Daraisa of Hotza'ah, you have to do what's called an Akira and a Hanacha. Picking it up in one Rishus and putting it down in the other Rishus. If I only do half of that, like the first Mishnah discusses in Shabbos, then I'm only going to get an Issa D'Rabbanan. If I did an Akira or a so we'll see. So again, this is the Gemara. The Aruch HaShabbos summarizes, as many do. If you look in source number 6, based on the Shulchan Aruch in the beginning of the 4th volume of the Mishnah Berurah. Rishus HaYachid. Hu amakom amuka mechitzos shegovan asar tvachim o yoser. You have an area that's surrounded by mechitzos that are 10 tvachim tall. So it could be either in a ditch or above ground walls. V'shitcho lefachos arbal about tvachim, and the area is at least 4 by 4 tvachim that's used by the public for travel, or l'schora, or for business. V'rachbot hazayin amo yoser, 16 amos wide. That's a requirement for Rishus HaRabim Daraisa, 16 amos wide. That is the minimum. Karmelis, we'll get to more of the definitions, but Karmelis, makom she'eino Rishus HaYachid ve'eino Rishus HaRabim, neither. Kagon yam osade v'chayotze bazeh, a sea, a field, dino me'atar k'makom p'tur. Midaraisa, it's a makom p'tur because it's lacking one of the other definitions of we'll get to that, and makom p'tur. Makom p'tur is an exempt spot. Yesh makomo shegam midrabanan lo gazra alehem. Says the Aruch HaShabbos, there are some places that the Chachamim didn't even say is as a status midrabanan. V'im nikram b'shem makom p'tur. It's called makom p'tur. Kagon amud ha'omeid b'Rishus HaRabim gugovo shlosha tacham yoser. You have a pillar. You have a pillar in the street that is 3 tfachim high. If it's less than 3 tfachim, then it's like it's on the ground. But it's at least between 3 and 10 tfachim high. Or it's not 4 by 4 wide. It's not the makom p'tur. So that's mutter. Umutter lahaver chafatzim Rishus HaYachid Rishus HaRabim, or vice versa. This will come in very handy if somebody walks out into the street with without remembering they have something in their pocket. So where do you put it down on? So you go back. If you can find the Makom P'tur, then it's good to put it on that Makom P'tur. So this is the background to the Shulchan Aruch and Shin Mem Vav. Says, source 7, Min HaTorah, Ein Chayev Ela B'motzi U'machnis V'zorek U'moshit Mirshus Yachal Rishus Rabim or Mirshus Rabim Rishus Yachid. That's the Din Daraisa. V'chacham Mashu Mikarmelis Rishus Yachid or Rishus Rabim Omehem L'Karmelis L'cham Aserd Karmelis in either direction. Fine. Let's go a little deeper now into what is a Rishus Harabim. What's the definition? Why is this going to be so crucial? Because as we'll see, if you want to build what we call an Erev, the strings and the poles, that could only be built around a Rishus Harabim d'Rabanan. If something is a Rishus Harabim d'Oraisa, you cannot build an Erev around it. That would need something more than just the strings. So what is a Rishus Harabim? So far, what do we see? We saw 16 amos. 16 amos wide. But the Gemara continues. Source 8, Shabbos Sadi Tes. The Kaimalan, Derech Rishus Harabim Shezes Riyama. Like we said, Anan de Gamrina Lami Mishkan, we learn from the Mishkan. Number 1. Number 2. Amar Shmuel Bar Yehuda, Amar Rav Abba, Amar Funa Marav. Hamaver Dal Amos Rishus Harabim Mikura. If it has a roof, it's not Rishus Harabim. If it has a roof, it's not Rishus Harabim Daraisa. Patur Lafisha Eno Domo Ladiklei Midbar. It's not similar to the Bnei Yisrael when they were in the desert, and that's where we learn Rishus Harabim from. So not roofed, 16 amos wide, and the Gemara assumes that it was only a Rishus Harabim in the desert when Bnei Yisrael were there. Says the Gemara, Shabbos Davav. Midbar. Why isn't the desert on this list? The Gemara is quotes a brayso that the Midbar is Rishus Harabim. So how could Midbar be on the Carmelis examples? Amar Abaya, Lo Kasha, Kam Bizman Yisrael Shruin B'Midbar, Kam Bizman Azeh. A regular desert is very sparse in terms of the people there. But when Bnei Yisrael were there were plenty of Jews there. Based on this Gemara, Rashi and Tosfos both hold that to be Rishus Harabim d'Oraisa, you need 600,000 people there. Living there, traveling through there, different opinions, but you need something, 600,000. Tosfos, there, Shabbos Davav. Rabbi Yisrael Shruim B'Midbar. Mashma Ksas. The Einer Rishus Harabim Ela Emkein Mitzuyin Sham Shishim Ribo Kimo B'Midbar. That's what it sounds like from the Gemara. That's the only time when it will be considered, the Midbar will be considered Rishus Harabim. Or Rashi, it's Shabbos Davav and Erevin Davav. Right? Erev, Rashi and Erevin, Rishus Harabim. Mashma Rachav Sheishes Re'ama, the Ir Shemitzuyin Bashishim Ribo, the In Bachoma. 600,000. This condition is not explicit in Shas anywhere. This is how Rashi and Tosfos interpret that line of Bizman Yisrael Shruyim B'Midbar, but it's not mafurish. But this is what Rashi and Tosfos says. The Rambam doesn't say a word. The Rambam does not quote this requirement, this kula. It's a kula. Because if there aren't 600,000, it can't be Rishus Harabim d'Oraisa, according to Rashi and Tosfos. The Rambam says you don't need that requirement. Says the Rambam, Ezeo Rishus Harabim, source 13, Midbaros, Via Arim, Vishvakim, deserts and forests and markets for Dracham Amufulash land, Ubilvad, Sheiruchav, Haderaf Tezai and Amav, Lo Yelav Tikra. No roof, 16 amos wide. That's it. That's what the Rambam says. And the Beis Yosef summarizes these shitas. Again, Rashi and Tosfos and the Rosh all say that there's an issue of 600,000. That's what you need. But says the Beis Yosef in the middle of 14, V'ein kein das harambam. The Rambam does not mention that. Delo hizkir t'nai zeh b'perak Yudal. He doesn't mention this because of Rav Magid kein das Ramban v'harashba v'gam hu hiskim al yadam. There's no remez, it doesn't say this in the Gemara. So again, Rashi might say, I think that's what the Midbar means. But the Beis Yosef points out that this is a major machlokas Rishonim. And in Shulchan Aruch, he quotes two opinions. He quotes a Stam opinion, and then he quotes a Yesh Omrim. First, he quotes the Stam opinion, and that's the Rambam. No requirement. All right, what is it? 16 amos wide, and no roof. No roof. Ezel Rishus Harabim. Haruf Chovozu Shvakim Arachavim Dazainama. Ve'ina Mukarmei Lam Choma. Right, the Shulchan Aruch quotes the Rambam Shita. V'afilu Yesh Lam Choma. Even if they have a wall, Imhem Mefulashim Mishar Lashar, if they go straight through, it's a Rishus Harabim. The Yesh Omrim, says the Shulchan Aruch, Shekal She'ein Shishim Riba over Midbo B'chol Yom Eino Rishus Harabim. If it doesn't have 600,000 people there traveling there every day, that's his formulation of this Shita, that's the Kula. And the Taz says that's the Minhag Olam. The Taz says the minhag olam is to, you want to build an Erev, so as long as the city doesn't have 600,000, that would be good enough. Says the Taz, Ubefi, source 16. Ubefi olam murgal akshav, she'en lana rishus harabim, v'kudas yishomrim ve'im rabim. Yakin machmir yachal atzma, you want to be machmir for yourself. That's not the minhag olam. The ein biyado limchos v'mashenogim akshav, we don't have the right or the authority to protest. The Mishnah Berurah also says it's a machlokas Rishonim, but it seems like the minhag olam is like that kula. Linyan halacha, says the Mishnah Berurah, mitasa machaber dekata deazu rak b'shem yesh omrim. So if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, he quotes a stam and a yesh omrim. So usually the rule is halacha kestam. So mashal halacha lo sirle mikom makom. What can you do? Says the Mishnah Berurah. Aim bana koach limchos bi'ad asomchan al deazu. We can't be mocha or protest those that rely on this heter. The deazu gamkin lo das yichidahi, because this is not a das yachid either. There are many Rishonim that hold that way. Bal nefesh, the Mishnah Berurah says bal nefesh yachmir le'atzma. If you look in that Bir Halacha, when he quotes many shitas on both sides of the issue, he says really yesh lahachmir, because that's not explicitly in the text in the Gemara, and he says it's mashma, right? Though there's such a discussion in the earlier sources, in Chazal, that talk about the Rishus Harabim or not. So it says the Bir Halacha, Chazal knocked out shofar because Shema Yavirenu. If it was so unusual, how many cities had 600,000 in those days? Very few. Very few. And yet Chazal were worried, Shema Yavirenu. So says the Bir Halacha, it sounds like that's not a requirement. It sounds like that you don't need it. Right? Says the Bir Halacha. Dilo haya Rishus Harabim dafka mishishim ribo lo haya mishtamid gemara lashmeinu davar zeh. First of all, the Gemara would mention it. V'gam, and also the adur shagaz Chazal in Yikei Shofar b'Shabbos. Chazal knocked out shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos. Ubit lo asay daraisa l'klal Yisrael k'dei shelo yabel yechil Shabbos. And they knocked out the mitzvah daraisa chaviva, so you don't come to Chilul Shabbos. She'aviv esocham yandenu v'amru dafka kshish ba'usa ir shishim ribo. If it's only when there's no shishim ribo, so that's davar she'eino matzui, that there is shishim ribo. So he says bevadai, he thinks Ishmael lisboch ein limchos b'yad makilin. But l'chadchila, one shouldn't rely on that. The Aruch HaShulchan, though, has the opposite approach, and that is, this is the shita. This is the minhag olam. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, also Shin Memei, al kapanim ma moel arichus. Acharei, look at his lashon. Shaha'erev in his pashu b'rov ar Yisrael, harba me'oshanim mikodem. For hundreds of years, we have erevs for rak al smach heter. So it's all based on this heter that it's because it's 16 amos wide, it's not ruv. But this is the heter, it doesn't have 600,000. Uki'ilu baskol yatzet, as if a baskol went out from heaven. Halacha kashitazu. That's what it is. The Aruch HaShulchan says it must be v'bana la'akid. And if we would protest, lo levad shelo yitzaisu, not only would they not listen to our protest, elanira kimishtagim, they would think we're crazy. Like, what do you mean? Nobody ever held to this chumrah. Shedavar zen is pashti b'chol yisrael poskim. Everyone holds to this. Ina ein lanu rishus harabim. Very few Rishus Harabim daraisas, because we rely on the shita, says the Aruch HaShulchan. He spends time coming up with another schus of Klal Yisrael, but this is the Aruch HaShulchan. If you look, there's another Shulchan Aruch, which sounds like he paskins l'kula. Right? In the other Shulchan Aruch, he said the stam and the yesh omrim, and the yesh omrim was the kula of 600,000. But if you look in the Shulchan Aruch elsewhere, Shin Gimel, source number 20, Shulchan Aruch says, "V'ya idna nashidi da nagu latzes b'kol hashachshitin." Our women wear jewelry. V'yesh sha'amru d'medina asura. Some say it's asur. How can they wear jewelry? Elamikivan, you might come to take it off. Shikivan shalo yishmu mutav yisho goes for al yimazidas. But we don't tell them because they're not going to listen. V'yesh lindu aleim schus. This is in the Shulchan Aruch. Some are malami schus on these women. Shlomar shenogos ken al pi asfara chrona shakasafti. Shlo asru latzes betachshitin lachas shenimu reves. V'hashta the less vanu Rishus Harabim gamor, havile kol Rishus Harabim shalano karmelis. And therefore, that explains the women's minhag. So what does the Shulchan Aruch say? That he's alluding to, and he's mentioning that shita, that we don't have Rishus Harabim gamor bisman hazeh, because we don't have 600,000. The Magen Avraham is medayik from this Shulchan Aruch. That's what we paskin, because this is stam of the Shulchan Aruch. Says the Magen Avraham, 21, Hamasid ben Yamin, v'shlam aluria, pasku lechumra, al das rov poskim lahakel, Chen pasuk b'Shulchan Aruch, Shin Gimel, Yud Ches, what we just saw, Ubakama Dokti. The Magen Avraham in Shin Mem Hey, which we were just talking about, mentions this Shulchan Aruch in Shin Gimel to explain that we rely Meikar Din on the Kula Shita. The Birkei Yosef is not so convinced. The Magen Avraham says it's quoted in Shulchan Aruch. The Rabbi Yossi says the Shulchan Aruch is clearly a b'diavad situation. The Shulchan Aruch is discussing these women that refuse to take off their jewelry. Okay, what can you do? But that's not l'chadchila, right? What is his lashon? It's a b'diavad lashon. It's a yesh shalimdu aleihem zchus. That's his lashon. Says the Birkei Yosef. The Das Maran Nirika Rambam. Shrei kasas for us a Rambam bistam basra acharis kasas b'yalam lashon yishomrim. Like we said, Birkei Yosef says Meikra didn't sound like the Shulchan Aruch is machmir in Shin Men Hey. Umisoras biyadenu, and we have the misora. Whenever you have 2 days in the Shulchan Aruch, the first one is the stam. You pass them like the stam. The nearly the efshali yashev. Even here in Shin Gimel says the Birkei Yosef, it's not a lashon of l'chadchila. Shlo yikshal klal amuskam hazeh asher nodu mizman maran ki yadua. Lo kasam maran less lamesh zarabim lo kasu bistam. He has a whole reason why he's giving a heter. So therefore, that's the olam as we saw there. Chashochan Mishnah Berurah, but it is a kula. There is also an Issa D'Rabbanan to carry in a Carmelis. And a Carmelis has to have, the Shmir Shabbos just notes, we just spoke about the definition of Rosh Hashanah. A Carmelis has to have at least an area of 4x4 tfachim. That's not Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah entirely, and that's what the Shmir Shabbos notes. So there are many types of Carmelios in our neighborhoods, and a Carmelis you can build an Erev around, so that's okay. A Carmelis nechshav kol makam she'ein Rosh Hashanah, v'gam eina b'geder Rosh Hashanah. So a field, it doesn't have walls around it, so it can't be a Rosh Hashanah, but it's also not as public as a big thoroughfare or street, so it's not Rosh Hashanah. So you have many areas like this that are somewhat in the middle, and those are an Issa D'Rabbanan, at least to carry in and to carry from there to Rosh Hashanah or to Rosh Hashanah. Okay. So we mentioned that in order to make an Erev, as we call it, one needs to only have Rosh Hashanah D'Rabbanan. Is there any other way to help out Rosh Hashanah D'Oraisa? Is there any way to make it mutter? So the Gemara talks about, what if you have gates? You have, let's say, walls, and you have gates around the city. And do you need them to be locked at night to break up the Rosh Hashanah status? What if all you have is that they're ro'ui to be locked at night, but they're not actually locked at night? So that is the Gemara in Erevin, and the Shulchan Aruch based on that. Says the Gemara in Erevin again, Davav, Erevin, Davav. Keitzad ma'arvin derech Rosh Hashanah. How could you be ma'ari versus Hashanah? What do you do? Also, Tzurba Pesach mikan v'lechi v'kor mikan. Okay, whatever the case is, the Gemara says this is how you're ma'ari Rosh Hashanah. Daraisa says the Gemara, you could do that. Rosh Hashanah mi ma'arva. Rabbi Yochanan. No, Rabbi Yochanan said Yerushalayim ilmale dalsosecha nin olos balayla. Had the doors of Yerushalayim not been locked at night, we would consider it Rosh Hashanah. But what's mashma? And the Gemara gives a different answer then. But what is the Gemara mashma? That because the doors are locked at night, it's not a Rosh Hashanah, right? That is the Gemara in Erevin Davav. Elsewhere, the Gemara says it's a machlokas. Actually, it's a machlokas. That if the requirement for the gates to be locked. Atzma says Shulchan Aruch, again, machlokas. The Rif, the Rush, and others say the gates don't have to be locked. The Rambam, the gates must be locked. And the Rambam holds in Hilchos Shabbos that as long as it's physically possible to lock them, that's sufficient to make this called not Zarabim. And you want to be able to put a string and build an Erev. You can't build an Erev unless the gates are locked at night. It doesn't say how often. So you could have some major cities that you could lock it once a year somehow, and that would be good enough. The Rosh Hashanah needs doors, says the Shulchan Aruch, if they're locked at night. Even if they're ro'ui to be locked at night, that's also good enough, even if you don't actually like that. The Halacha says the minhag olam is to rely on a Tzurba Pesach, to rely on the shiur of the Rambam. The Rambam says that ro'ui to be locked is good enough. You don't have to actually lock it. So the Halacha says we rely on that, plus maybe the kula that we just said before of 600,000. The Halacha says, which is a Rabbim. Right? How do we have a Tzurba Pesach? How do we build these strings? Right? So he says, turning over, 294. Al Shita Dilididon, less than Rosh Hashanah, Gemin Kasha Ma'od. Let's say we don't have Rosh Hashanah, called 600,000. So he says, Va'nachon de Somchan Al Shita Sarambam. He passed like the Rambam, that in this case, that if you have everything closed up and it could be locked, so then that would be a kula. There is another idea when you have a very jam-packed together city, like many New York City or Brooklyn or some of these places where the houses form walls with each other. So the Chazon Ish talks there that might also mitigate and make something in the Rosh Hashanah. Because the Rabbanan, after all, there are walls here. So he discusses if you have these walls, maybe even if you have a Pesach that's very large, you would still be able to consider this a Rosh Hashanah D'Rabbanan at most, because of the buildings that are next to each other. Rabbi Shalom also in Orla Zion says that in a situation of need, one may rely on a densely populated city on this Erev. Right? Efshar lahakel lataltel. I'm in 28. B'shas adchad ba'ayaros hasmuchos. Ba'ayaros. Sha'osem Erev shal Tzurba Pesach misaviv la'ir. You can rely because there are a number of kulas that you could put together. Number one, Chadalos Rashi v'Siyaso. Rashi Tosfos 600,000. So many of these places don't have 600,000. Number one, main shishim ribo bokin bo b'chol yom lo chashiv v'sasrabim. Number two, if you have him ninja lomer the chashiv, what about if you ask like many other Rishonim, the Rambam and others that don't mention 600,000, but maybe there is other possibilities. Some Rishonim that say afilu b'naz abra kundisin bebika, you put 4 different poles and you put a roof on them, or others say if you have omin ruba laparitz, you have the buildings touching each other. So there are kulas to get something to be called a Rosh Hashanah D'Rabbanan, and then you'd be able to build in Erev. The Ravadia also says even Sfardim who rely on the Erev have Yesh Mi'amal Lismo. Rav Shechter has certain shitas in Efaz Erevin, some Lakula, some Lachumra. Rav Shechter holds, you have it there in the last source, in 30, that highways, intercity highways, L'chora, that by definition is Rosh Hashanah D'Oraisa. According to him, if any highway going through a city, that's difficult. Makes it difficult to be able to build an Erev in that, according to his Shita. But that's what he says. That also might be part of Rosh Hashanah D'Oraisa. If you have an interstate city that goes from city to city, that's ultimate Rabbin usage. And that would be something that we wouldn't be able to build an Erev around. Okay, we'll have to talk next time. We'll see specific Erevs about the POC, Paris, Manhattan, other areas. And then we'll have to get into how to build and constructing in a halachic. We'll have to see all that in the coming shiur. Okay, we'll stop here.